you've lost weight. And I said, no, I just shaved my beard. So this is good advice. If you ever, whoever you are, male or female, shave your beard. Knocks about 4 pounds off straight away. Boom, like that. Good morning. It's 9 o'clock here on the West Coast. I'm Anthony Davis. This is Backchannel. I'm in Los Angeles, California, and producer Carla is in London, England. We're going to bring you a very interesting show today. We've done a lot of work on this. We've been, while you're relaxing and enjoying your morning, Carla and I are beavering away, putting this show together, making sure that it's a guaranteed winner. So, you want to know what's coming up? Let me tell you. We're going to look at the iguanas that have been falling from the trees as the cold snap hits Florida. I watched NBC News covering this story, covering the East Coast, the snow. And, the average temperatures are 15 degrees below normal, right? It's frozen. The whole of the East Coast is frozen. NBC, mainstream news, legacy news media, didn't once mention climate change in their 10-minute report. Didn't once mention climate change. They were like, the iguanas, people are frozen, record snowfall, it's 15 degrees colder than it has ever been at this time of year, How are you doing? What are you doing to get out the snow? Not a mention of an interview with a climatologist, climate scientist, no mention of changing climate, no mention of climate change. And I was like, why is that? And then it occurred to me, because I think in America, certainly with networks like NBC, they're like, well, if we say it's climate change, then half the country are going to think that it's that's like a political thing. And so we don't mention climate change because that's like a Dem thing. It's a Democrat thing. And I was like, wow, this is reverse politicization, right? This is NBC saying, we want to be impartial. Therefore, we won't mention the most catastrophic potential danger to the planet that all people, Republicans and Democrats, live on. It fascinated me. And I was like, this is interesting. So we can talk about that. Also, the UK has changed its rules on mandatory vaccines for health workers. We'll be asking, should the US follow suit? And a Pulitzer Prize-winning novel about the Holocaust has topped Amazon's bestseller list after a school board in Tennessee banned it. Result. And then finally, on this day, 1971, Apollo 14 departed for the moon from a studio in Area 51. Funny. So I'm your host, Anthony Davis. This is The Anthony Davis Show. You are welcome to join me in multiple different ways. You can watch me on your Echo Show. You can talk back to me on your Echo Show. Just say the wake-up word, then your message. You can go to backchannel.tv and you can message me that way, and you can have your views, your say. You can leave reviews. You can tell us, where you want the show to go, whatever direction. It's like kind of user-generated. Think of me as your puppet, like Bobby and James Purify once said. It's a very, very interesting reference, that. Please play it back and work it out. And as you know, Backchannel is the only place you can listen to and watch and chat with hosts of live shows right here on your device. So we're going to, and we're on YouTube as well. So, if you're in the YouTube mood, then go to YouTube. What was I going to say? Oh, yes, that's right. We're going to look at the newspapers as well. We're going to zigzag all around the country. And we're going to look at the newspapers. Do you think I should I put this one in as well? Look, should I have like multiple microphones today? I could have like this one over here. I've actually got 3. I could have 3. Should I have 3 in front of me like I'm doing an interview? Carla's furious. She thinks that all my microphones are like a climate change disaster. I'm telling you, this is kind of... I really don't see what the problem is. Here we go, look. Carla's got her head in her hands. Here we go, look. She thinks that I'm too contradictory because I'm so environmentally friendly in so many ways, and yet when it comes to buying Chinese microphones. Let me tell you something. This one was made in America. This one here. Listen, Carla, this is important. This one was made in America. This one was made in Australia. And this one was probably made in China. You can tell because it's shiny. Australia, America, China. I'll put them there. It's kind of funny, isn't it? I personally prefer the American one. The American one's the only one that's working right now. Okay, so let's go to the morning newspapers because enough of this stuff and nonsense. We're going to go to Alabama to the Dothan Eagle right now. Oh, well, let's say hello to a few people as well because you're jumping on the chat facility like it's Christmas. So welcome. I've only just turned it on, Carla, so I can't see who's already shown up. Can you tell me who's already here? Because oh. Yasmin's here. Yasmin, thank you for joining us. In Texas. Welcome, first time, wonderful. Kevin, welcome from Georgia. Nice to know that you've chosen to spend your morning with Backchannel and our range of microphones. Sorry? Oh, Cole is in South Carolina. Cole, welcome. This is great. J-Lo is in New York. I mean, J-Lo has homes all over the world, so it's only fair to say that today she's in New York, but she could actually be anywhere. She could be anywhere. Logan's in Virginia Beach. Welcome, Logan. Great to know that you're here. Bella as well. I mean, this has become like quite the collection of it's like a motley crew now, isn't it? This is wonderful. Got people in Texas. This is wonderful. Thank you for joining us. Thank you. And Verona's in New Hampshire. I mean, what's happening this morning? It's like people are just showing up from all over the country. I mean, maybe word got out. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe word got out. And Deborah's in California. Is that the Deborah in California? Yeah, I think it probably is. Okay, so let's go to the Dothan Eagle for Alabama this morning. They lead with former officers face trial. Yes, a federal trial against 3 former Minneapolis police officers seeks to hold them responsible for not stopping George Floyd's murder and perhaps strike a blow against long-standing police culture that breeds reluctance to rein in fellow officers. It says the circumstances of Floyd's death, pinned under Officer Derek Chauvin's knee for more than 9 minutes, recorded from multiple camera angles, may help prosecutors clear the bar for conviction on a charge that's rarely brought, in part because it can be difficult to prove. It says, regardless, several former federal prosecutors and legal experts see a message in the Department of Justice's pursuit of charges accusing J. Alexander Kueng, Thomas Lane, and Tu Tao of violating Floyd's civil rights. Yeah, this is basically the 2 guys that stood and watched as Derek Chauvin publicly executed George Floyd. Andrea, thank you for joining us. Good morning. Andrea is in Florida. Welcome to Backchannel. We're just looking through the morning newspapers this morning. The headline, another presidential run on this Alabama newspaper. This is because of Trump's rally in Conroe, Texas. It says, as he prepared to tee off one of his Florida golf courses, a fellow player introduced Donald Trump as the 45th president of the United States. 45th and 47th, responded matter-of-factly before hitting his drive. The quip, a moment of levity on the links captured on a shaky cell phone video, was a reminder that the former president often has another presidential run on his mind. But the declaration belied the growing challenges he's confronting as a series of complex legal investigations ensnare Trump, his family, and many associates. Well, I mean, this is the thing. I've stuck to my views, and I said this from the very beginning, that the only reason he is seeking a second term, because he's enjoying being a former president right now, right? He still gets called Mr. President. He still gets to travel in a motorcade. He still has people surrounding him. He gets the security, he gets all the federal security that he could never afford on his own. It's insane. Former presidents get access to all of this stuff, especially him, because of course he's such a controversial character. So, and he wears the pin badge sometimes, and he just there was that video of him at Mar-a-Lago the other day where he kind of showed up at dinner and just did this to try and get people to applaud him. And it was so embarrassing because, I was like, wow, it took my breath away that he would be that insecure, that he couldn't just go in and have his steak and tomato ketchup. Well done. Well, the thing is, and this is what I'm kind of alluding to, he only will run again to try and avoid prosecution. It's the only reason to run again. It's to avoid prosecution, because he'll then get presidential privilege, which prevents him from being prosecuted for some strange reason. And that's the reason he wants to run again. But now it's a race against time, because there's 3 investigations. Obviously, there's the January 6th insurrection investigation that's taking place at the U.S. Capitol, the Select Committee. And they will then pass what their findings are over to the Justice Department, and then Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, will or will not. Some people say that he's benign. And then, of course, there's the Southern District of New York and Letitia James. And then, of course, there's the District of Manhattan. And they are both after him on fraud charges for the Trump Organization, which he heads. So, there's a lot of potential space for him to kind of go down and go to prison. But my concern is that, rich white people invariably don't go to prison, or even orange people, for that matter. So they wear orange jumpsuits, but they don't, you know what I'm saying. No, Carla's asking me if I thought that Trump wanted to win the presidency first time. No, Trump had no intention of winning the presidency, and I don't think that he ever... he never planned to win. His plan was to set up a TV news network called Trump TV that he was going to run from his Mar-a-Lago basement, and he was basically going to be like this mouthpiece because, he wasn't on television anymore doing the Apprentice, so he wanted to have an outlet for his, political anger, because it's very easy to criticize other people, other politicians, which he did with Obama endlessly on Twitter. So, of course, when he won, it was like, hang on a second, what am I doing here? The rumors are that Melania cried when she found out that he'd won, because she did not want to be a first lady. And suddenly they were thrown into a bit of a tiz, because they had no planning for a win. All they had planned for was to use the publicity and the promotion of the campaign. They raised all that money for the campaign, and then to harness all of that promotion and put it into Trump TV. And obviously that never happened. So, he was a reluctant president. And then once he got into the White House and enjoyed the trappings and the security and all of this additional attention that goes with being the president, he started to relish it. And then he started to kind of backtrack and be like, God chose me to be the president, all this stuff. And so, it's not difficult to kind of see what's going on in that guy's mind, because he says the quiet stuff out loud. And did you see that he put out a... because he can't go on Twitter anymore, obviously, because he's been banned. But he actually put out a statement on his website yesterday. Did you see what it said? It said that, unfortunately, Mike Pence didn't overturn the election. So he basically perjured himself. He perjured himself. He basically admitted that the plan was to overturn the election. Just those words, overturn an election. He didn't lose by 3 votes or 1 vote. He lost by 7 million votes, right? So he tried to overturn the election, and he admitted it on his website on Sunday. So that's now going to be evidence for the January 6th committee. And arguably, he just basically imprisoned himself. He just prevented himself from running again because he says the quiet parts out loud. Because I've said all along, he doesn't have an intellect. He's just a guy who bumbles through. And because of his natural instincts to be, the person that he is, he does all this damage. Sues everyone, falls out with everyone, doesn't pay contractors. He just doesn't care. He certainly doesn't care about all the people at the rallies. He literally does not care about those people at all. He just uses them. And that's the tragedy of this cult, is that they think that he cares about them, and he really doesn't. He only cares about himself. And so when I talk to people who support him, I'm like, you do realize that he really has done nothing for you. Like, nothing in those 4 years got better for you. Anyway, the probes, which are unfolding in multiple jurisdictions and consider everything from potential fraud and election interference to the role he played in the January 6th insurrection, represent the most serious legal threat Trump has faced in decades of an often litigious public life. They're intensifying. A new poll from the Associated Press NORC Center for Public Affairs Research found Trump's iron grip on the GOP may be starting to loosen. His popularity among Republicans is declining, with 71%. So they say they have a favorable opinion compared with 78% in September. But a new poll shows only a narrow majority of Republicans, 56%, want him to run for president in 2024. 44% of Republicans do not want Trump to run. The thing is, who would run instead? Cruz? DeSantis? I mean, who is there? I mean, you know that there's like a conspiracy out there that they want Biden to put Kamala Harris on the Supreme Court to get her out the White House, and then to go bipartisan in the presidency by inviting Mitt Romney to be the vice president. Have you heard this? People want Mitt Romney, a Republican who voted for Trump's impeachment, to be the vice president in the current administration and put Kamala Harris on the Supreme Court. There's been a lot of negativity about Kamala Harris in the last few days as well. People really don't like her. No, people really haven't taken to her. And I'd say that she is entirely unlikable. I don't think she's bad at her job. I just think she's entirely unlikable. And it's a shame. It's a shame. VP to advise Biden, it says Vice President Kamala Harris has a new assignment helping President Joe Biden select the first black woman to serve on the U.S. Supreme Court. Biden said last week he would nominate a black woman to replace retiring liberal Justice Stephen Breyer, and that he would consult leading scholars and lawyers on the appointment. And I'm fortunate to have advising me in the selection process Vice President Kamala Harris, Biden said. She's an exceptional lawyer, former Attorney General of the state of California, and former member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Harris, as California Attorney General, sat on the state's Commission on Judicial Appointments, which reviews the governor's judicial selections, when Judge Leondra Kruger was appointed to California's High Court. So, yeah, I mean, she has experience. The other thing we should probably talk about is the fact that an increasing number of Republicans are saying that it's racist that Biden wants to put a black person on the Supreme Court, a black female. They're actually saying that it's a racist act. And this is just more white supremacy and whitewashing, It's just so offensive. They just don't get it. They don't get it. The thing is, my view is that there's never been a black female on the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court hears so many cases that will affect black females. And to have black females not represented on the Supreme Court in 2022 just seems crazy to me. And so what they're arguing is, well, we want the best person for the job. And the point is that there are enough black females who are qualified to be a Supreme Court justice. There's literally, his shortlist has like 17 people on it currently. It's not like, oh, I've got a choice of like 3. There's dozens. There's literally dozens of potential Supreme Court justice choices who happen to be African American and qualified. I mean, Trump made a big thing of putting a woman on when he chose Amy Coney Barrett. He made a whole thing of it. I'm choosing a woman, we need to have a woman. And it's like, okay, well, you can do that. The difference is she was white and she was Christian and she was conservative, and that's why they didn't have a problem with it. They actually changed the rules to enable him to do it immediately within a couple of weeks, ramming it in before the election. I just don't think people have an argument to say that Biden should not try and be progressive with his decision. Because this is America. It's so racist and it needs representation. Okay, that's how the Dothan Eagle starts this morning. Let's take a look at the next newspaper on my list. Is the Montgomery from Alabama, Montgomery Advertiser. It says, inaccurate certificates hide true toll of COVID. Yes, it says in late January, the official death toll from COVID-19 in Lafayette Parish, Louisiana, stood at 210. At a makeshift memorial, the local Episcopal Church, never been able to say that word, friends and relatives planted small white flags representing how many people had died. Some inscribed flags with names of those that they had lost, but a couple of 100 flags were missing. Those people almost certainly died of COVID-19, according to examination of newly released data from the CDC. But their death certificates don't mention it. Instead, they list conditions with symptoms that look a lot like COVID, such as Alzheimer's, hypertension, and diabetes. Nationwide, nearly 1 million more Americans have died in 2020 and 2021 than in normal pre-pandemic years. But about 800,000 deaths have been officially attributed to COVID-19, according to the data. So the majority of those additional 195,000 deaths are unidentified COVID cases, public health experts have long suggested, pointing to the unusual increase in deaths from natural causes. Well, they've always said this, haven't they? Especially in developing nations, because there's less facility to make those, logistically to record those deaths accurately. But they're basically saying that the numbers of COVID deaths has always been an undercount. Always. In America and throughout the rest of the world, it's always been an undercount. Because yes, people naturally die, of course they do, but there is an increased ratio of people who are dying of something that, in the heat of the moment, in a busy emergency room or in a hospital, where it's like, yeah, okay, they died of heart failure, but what brought that on? Was their immune system weakened by COVID-19? Did you happen to see the Joe Rogan video this morning, Carla? The video that he posted on Instagram to try and backtrack on the Spotify thing? Oh, he's a very powerful person now in the media. People like Joe Rogan have basically taken the place of, commentators, And I watched his 9-minute video. Joni Mitchell and Neil Young have pulled their music from Spotify to kind of encourage this to happen. Yeah, they chose him. Because he's worth more to them than Neil Young and Joni Mitchell, I guess. Anyway, I watched his... It wasn't an apology. He was trying to clear the air, backtrack a bit. And everything he said just didn't make any sense. It just didn't make any sense. He basically said, I'm going to try harder to have, varying views. And it's like, no. Do the truth, my friend. Just do the truth. The problem is he goes looking for controversial characters to bring on because he wants to create controversy, because that's what makes his show interesting. And I get that it's good to have interesting conversations with people, but choose a subject like, did man really land on the moon? Or, did Jesus exist? Don't choose something where people are actually dying right now. A worldwide pandemic. Don't go looking for clinicians who are going to have opposing views, because if you go looking for alternative and controversial views in the medical profession, you will find them. But science is about the collective consensus of scientists. That's what good science is. You find the consensus across the entire industry. 99.5% of scientists have the same view about COVID, of how it jumped from bats to humans, how it spread out of China to Europe, how it spread from Europe to the rest of the world, and how we ignore it at our peril. Because it's normal. A worldwide pandemic is normal. They've been writing about it for decades, for hundreds of years. They've been writing about it. It's a normal thing. It just hasn't happened in 100 years. But it's not a conspiracy. It's normal. It's part of life. But because of the way that we live our lives, the way that we are relatively hygienic, and there are food standards, for example, in most countries, we don't get these things. And when they have happened before, like SARS or MERS, they've been shut down because we have really good, CDCs in every country of the world. So people just couldn't intellectualize the concept of a pandemic happening. But if you'd have seen the movie Contagion, you'll know that there's a playbook for it. If you'd have watched the documentary Pandemic on Netflix that came out 3 months before the pandemic did, you'll know that this whole thing was something that scientists have been preparing for. It's not unusual. It's not abnormal to have a pandemic amongst a human society. It just doesn't happen very often. And we are of a generation now where we have no relations who are still alive and remember the last one in 1918. That's my point. So people get anxious and nervous and they worry and they're like, well, what is this? What is this? I mean, it must be a conspiracy because this isn't normal. I don't want to give up my social life. I don't want to stay home. I don't want to work remotely. I don't want to wear a mask. I don't want to get vaccinated. This all happens because people cannot conceptualize or intellectualize that this is happening because they've got no point of reference. Now, should have successive governments over the last 100 years, said to us maybe once a year, there could be a pandemic. We're planning for a pandemic. Watch out, there might be a pandemic. Should they do that? Do you think in hindsight it would have been a good idea for all governments around the world to say, by the way, because I didn't know that Obama left a pandemic plan this thick in the office for the Trump administration? They all knew. And so the problem is now that you're going to have people who are like, well, it's a conspiracy because they all knew. If they all knew, it must have been a government conspiracy. And it's like, no, it's the opposite. They know that these things happen. Yeah, all the scientists who studied the Spanish flu, they knew there was another one coming and we were on borrowed time. They all knew that. But what I'm asking you is, do you think it would have been better for government every year to say, well, there goes another year without a pandemic. Aren't we lucky? Aren't we lucky we escaped this year? So that at least when it happened, we would be like, ah. But of course they don't do that because that's like saying, oh, well, you managed to live another year without dying. And we don't live like that. So unfortunately, people like Joe Rogan, who are entertainers, he's not a scientist, he's not an intellectual, he's just an entertainer. The guy's a comedian who got lucky with a great podcast, And he purposely invites controversial people on with weird views. He had Jordan Peterson on the other day for 4 hours. The guy is a nut. The guy is an absolute lunatic on the far right, on the fringes of society, who got successful with a book that made everybody feel better about themselves. And so now he's legitimized by the platform that Joe Rogan has. And then that puts the cat amongst the pigeons again. And so when Joe Rogan goes looking for two particular clinicians, one of them supposedly owned patents on the mRNA vaccine, and the other was he claimed to be the most published, doctor in history. Well, let me tell you something. If a doctor has got the time to write that many papers, they're not doing much doctoring. It's like just because someone is published more than anybody else, that doesn't make them good at what they do. That's not what science is. Science is a collective consensus of the entire scientific community. That's what science is. They're never 100% right. They're always 99% right. But they all agree. And there isn't a CDC on the planet that doesn't agree with the US CDC and Fauci and all of these people who have been advising us and keeping us safe. So let's be very clear about what this is and more importantly, what this isn't. This isn't something that has been invented by the government, because trust me, they're not that smart. They're really not. This has killed more people in Russia. Russia would keep quiet about these figures. More people have died in Russia after the United States. It's like it's huge now. Here's a story on the Montgomery Advertiser: fatal deer disease found in Alabama. You see, now that the always fatal chronic wasting disease has been detected in Alabama, what does that mean for nearly the $2 billion a year hunting industry and the 200,000 licensed deer hunters in the state? I love the fact that it doesn't say, oh no, what's going to happen to the animals? What they care about is the hunters and the hunting industry. That's so offensive. But my point is, CWD is this, chronic wasting disease. It's now in the deer community. And if they were humans and we were conspiracy theorists, we'd be like, oh, well, that's not a real disease. Oh, we've got a vaccine for it. No. Do you see what I mean? It's like things change. And also, here's the other thing about COVID, is that it's changing all the time. And so the people that criticize the CDC for changing their advice, wear masks, don't wear masks, wear cloth masks, wear N95s, it's because the disease is changing. The virus is mutating. And so the advice has to change along with the virus. Because the CDC would not be doing their job right if they just gave some advice at the very beginning and then didn't change it. I agree their messaging isn't ideal. And I think Rochelle Walensky's not necessarily she dropped the ball a couple of times, but that doesn't mean that what she's saying is inaccurate. That's the Montgomery Advertiser this morning. Sean, it's your first time here. Thank you for joining us. Welcome. Nice to know that you're a part of the show from Missouri. And we've got Yasmin in Texas, Coles in South Carolina, Jennifer Lopez is in New York, Bella's in Northern Virginia, Verona's in New Hampshire, Deborah is in California, Andrea in Florida. Thank you for joining Backchannel this morning. I hope you're enjoying this chat. You're very welcome to have your say, to have an opinion. If you have an opinion, then just go to backchannel.tv or wake up your device and say, and then your message. Easy. Okay, let's move on now to the... we're staying in Alabama. The Opelika Auburn News. Fun. I love these papers. So exciting. Thank you for these. U.S. pledges to put Russia on defensive at UN is the headline. The U.S. worked on Sunday to ramp up diplomatic and financial pressure on Russia over Ukraine, promising to put Moscow on the defensive at the UN Security Council as lawmakers on Capitol Hill said they were nearing agreement on the mother of all sanctions. The American ambassador to the United Nations said the Security Council will press Russia hard in a Monday session to discuss its massing of troops near Ukraine and fears it is planning an invasion. It says, our voices are unified in calling for the Russians to explain themselves, said Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield of the US and other council members. We're going into the room prepared to listen to them, but we're not going to be distracted by their propaganda. There it is. Also, Alabama trooper saves missing hunter. And Alabama state troopers being credited with saving the life of a missing hunter. Trooper Charles May found the man on the 22nd of January, suffering from severe hypothermia, gave the man his clothes, and then carried him about 100 yards out of the woods, the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency said on Facebook on Thursday. Paramedics later determined the man might not have survived another hour in the cold conditions. And judge to hear suit over Confederate memorial in Tuskegee. A Macon County judge is scheduled to consider arguments this week in legal fight over Confederate monument that stood for 116 years. Just take the monument down. Put it in a museum. It's the past. I've given up now. I've given up with trying to, hear the argument for symbols of the Confederacy. Because the more I read about the Confederacy, the more I realize it literally stood for nothing other than slavery, segregation, racism. It had nothing else to offer. It stood for one thing and one thing only. Let's go to the Anchorage Daily News now. State supply of COVID-19 drugs remains in flux. It says Alaska's supply of drugs meant to treat people with COVID-19 infections continues to remain in flux. Some treatments are becoming more available, but others remain scarce. But health officials say the treatments aren't right for everyone and need to be discussed between patient and provider. Yeah. So the Pfizer pill apparently is supposed to be very good. That's what I know. The monoclonal antibodies don't work for Omicron. Unless you're Ron DeSantis, then you think that they should still be working. It says, for instance, many vaccinated people likely won't need treatment in the first place, given the likelihood that they won't become severely ill from COVID-19 infection. Well, hang on a second. If you are against the vaccine, would you take the pill? Because is it that because the pill is just as experimental? The pill's only been around a few months. Are you saying if your argument is that the vaccine is experimental, which it is not, because they've been, working on this for decades, would you not take the pill also? I bet they'd take the pill. I bet people who were anti-vax would take the pill, which has literally just come to market about 15 minutes ago. GOP states rush to pass anti-abortion bills before Roe ruling. Yes, Nebraska lawmakers kicked off the new year by introducing a bill to ban all abortions if the Supreme Court's landmark Roe v. Wade decision is overturned. The next day, Florida legislators announced their plan to narrow the window for abortion access from 24 weeks of pregnancy to 15. And later that week in Phoenix, state legislators unveiled the Arizona Heartbeat Act, designed to mimic a Texas law passed last year. It says, with the Supreme Court expected to decide in the coming months whether to upend its nearly 50-year precedent that established a constitutional right to abortion nationwide, lawmakers in Republican-led states across the country have moved aggressively in recent weeks to lay the groundwork for a new era of abortion restrictions. Do you understand what it means to kind of evolve in a more kind of free and progressive way? Because, freedom is something I hear so much that's lauded by Republicans, and yet there's no freedom in banning abortion, is there? If you ban abortion, you take away a woman's right to choose. That's taking away her freedom. So how does that sit with Republicans who are just screaming the word freedom all the time? You will be less free if Roe v. Wade is overturned. It says, while it's possible the High Court either will overturn Roe or leave the precedent fully intact, many legal scholars and advocates on both sides anticipate the judges will land somewhere in the middle, instantly changing the standard for abortion legislation. Anti-abortion lawmakers are trying to predict what the Supreme Court might do as they craft laws designed to take effect soon after a ruling, whatever the justices decide. I think they're just going to go for it. I think they're going to overturn Roe v. Wade. I genuinely do. I just think they'll overturn it. I think that you have enough consensus now. And now we've heard what we know about Clarence Thomas. I didn't realize this about his wife being this kind of far-right extreme with extreme views that, they're saying is now more of a distraction to Clarence Thomas than anybody else on the Supreme Court. Sylvia, welcome to join. Well, I can't even speak. Welcome, and thank you for joining us here from Milwaukee. Sylvia's joined multiple times. Sean's in Missouri, also your first time. Welcome to Backchannel. This is the Anthony Davis Show. It happens between 9 and 11 Pacific. That's 12 and 2 Eastern, Monday through Friday. Dunleavy proposal to link $175 million in funding for ports faces hurdles. This is Governor Mike Dunleavy is proposing a funding injection to shore up Anchorage's bustling port of Alaska, but linked with the nearly idle port 5 miles across Nick Arm in the governor's home base of Matsu. So that's interesting, isn't it? Okay, that's how the Anchorage Daily News looks this morning. Let's move on to the Arizona Republic. If you're in Arizona, then this is for you. It says Tucson digs in against Rosemont copper mine. Tucson officials are trying to block operators of the Rosemont copper mine, a project the city has long opposed, from storing water in a recharge facility the city helped pay for and co-owns. It says different companies have tried for years to extract copper from the Santa Rita Mountains southeast of Tucson, and its current owner, Toronto-based Hudbay Minerals, has pledged to return some of the 1.7 billion gallons of groundwater it plans to pump each year back into the aquifer. Also, headline, We're Not Lazy. Volunteers hear from people experiencing homelessness during annual point-in-time count in Maricopa County. So there we go. That's the Arizona Republic this morning. Los Angeles Times, which is where I am right now. Rams are Super Bowl bowl-bound. Yes, this is a big story. If you know anything about sport, I heard people were celebrating the Rams yesterday. It says no place like home. Rams reaching LA Super Bowl is runaway success. Sophie Stadium shook. The Rams danced. Confetti sprayed. Thousands screamed again and again, answering the public address announcer's bellowing question of precisely who will own this Inglewood Palace in the upcoming Super Bowl. They've chanted it many times before, but it's never quite sounded like this. Whose house? Rams' house. It really doesn't suit me. Sport does not suit me. Really doesn't. Going easy on... Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah. I have done some sporting television. And I also announced on a Nike commercial last year, which was the biggest sporting commercial in history. Literally in history. I think it got 60 million views in 3 days, that video. It was crazy. Have you seen it? It's one of the best commercials ever made. It won the Grand Prix in Cannes for Best Commercial, and it won the Emmy Award last year for Best Commercial. It's called You Can't Stop Us. Nike, You Can't Stop Us. It might be the best ad I've ever seen. Not just because I voiced it, but because it literally is. It's one of the best ads I've ever seen. It makes me cry. Like every time, it's like a minute and a half long. And every time I watch it, I'm just like in tears. It's beautiful. Going easy on vaccine checks is the headline. It was a decision that grabbed that attention across the country. Los Angeles leaders had voted to require indoor restaurants, gyms, movie theaters, and many other businesses to check that customers were vaccinated against COVID-19. The LA rules made headlines as some of the strictest in the nation. Opponents, including members of the Libertarian Party of Los Angeles County, phoned into the city council meeting in October to decry the decision and vowed to overturn the ordinance at the ballot box. City leaders were unmoved. That's the headline. And University of California returns to in-person instruction today. Conflicts are brewing across the system as to whether to continue to offer remote learning options amid lingering fears about the health and safety risks during the continuing pandemic. I have a kind of sneaky suspicion that the pandemic is going to kind of, I think this year will be the end of it. That's my prediction. I think, come April, May, June, I think Omicron, we're going to see BA2 because Omicron is BA1. I think BA2 is going to just kind of split the atom effectively. And I just feel that we are now going to have enough immunity in society that I think it's just going to wane. That's my personal feeling. It's more of a projection because I'm just praying that this is going to be the case. I'm just praying that it's going to be the case. I'm so tired of it now. I take every precaution. Triple vaccinated, masking all the time, hardly going out, keeping my distance. But I'm not tired of the virus. I'm tired of the controversy. I'm tired of the Joe Rogans. I'm tired of the argument. I'm tired of the political division over it. That's what I'm tired of. I'm not tired of the virus because that's just part of life. I'm tired of the fact that people, even after 10 billion people have been vaccinated successfully with no adverse conditions, that people are still being like, oh no, I'm not taking the vaccine. 10 billion. There's 10 billion vaccines, not 10 billion people. 10 billion vaccines. Because it's a triple dose. For some, there are plenty of countries where they still haven't had a first dose. To remember that. Baggage quandary weighs heavy on Olympians' minds. There's two types of Olympic athlete, it says. In the warm days of summer, gymnasts compete in skimpy outfits and bare feet. Sprinters wear skin-tight tops and shorts, often minus the socks. Divers require a Speedo, maybe one of those little towels to wipe off, nothing more. And the frosty winter games, a snowboarder in a bulky jacket, pants and boots could stuff all three of those uniforms into his pockets. It says cold weather sports require gloves and goggles and helmets and duffel bags, bulging with hockey sticks, rifles for biathletes and four-man bobsleds the size of grand pianos. Downhill racers bring multiple pairs of skis for every conceivable type of snow and weather. Yeah, the Winter Games are equipment heavy, said Sarah Studebaker-Hall, former Olympian, who is operations director for US Biathlon, helps current athletes with travel. Interesting. It says the American team that departed Los Angeles International Airport on Thursday headed for the Beijing Games. See page 5. I'm just presuming that they were over their allowance. Omicron shadows Year of the Tiger, it says. Asian Americans adjust Lunar New Year traditions. Interesting. So that's the LA Times today. Let's move on to the Modesto Bee now. Say hi to... Yes? Oh yeah, Chinese New Year celebrations here are pretty huge, They're pretty huge. Just like repositioning some of these microphones. I don't want to annoy Carla too much. The Chinese have had a bit of a bad rap recently, haven't they? There really is this kind of... about all the hate crime that happened when Donald Trump was referring to COVID as the Kung flu and the China virus and all this stuff, The hate crime. And this is how stupid people are. They were attacking Koreans. They were attacking anybody that looked a bit Asian as Chinese. It's like... It's so tribal, so offensive. They might find out that it never even started in China in the first place. It could have started in Europe. It could have started in Italy. It could have started, in what was the other country that I was reading the other day? Was it Denmark or somewhere that had like a huge early incidence of it? It was somewhere around there. But the point is, it's like, you can't just apportion blame. If it happened in nature, then nature is worldwide. People love a common enemy, don't they? They love to kind of jump on a bandwagon and find a common enemy, somebody to criticize. And it's just unfortunate that China already had a bad rap for the fact that it's basically beating the rest of the world when it comes to exports and manufacturing. Because arguably they do it better, and they do it bigger, and they do it cheaper. And that's just, the system that we enjoy. If you wanted to pay the right price for stuff, like if you wanted to buy an iPhone that was made in America, it would be double the price. It would be $2,000 instead of $1,000. You happy to pay that, knowing that it's all been done with American workmanship? I doubt it. The Modesto Bee this morning leads with Stanislaus County offers N95 masks to cities to slow Omicron. Well-fitted N95 mask is another layer of protection against catching the Omicron variant of COVID-19 and is safer than a cloth mask that might have been sufficient against Delta, health experts say. Patterson will distribute N95 masks to its residents on Tuesday at a drive-thru at the Hammond Senior Center. The distribution, limited to 4 masks per vehicle, will run from 9 a.m. till the supply is gone, which will probably be 10 a.m. Trump dangles prospect of pardons for January 6 defendants. Now, this is a huge story. It's huge because what this guy is effectively saying is that anybody who commits a crime of violence against the country, against the United States, will not be subject to prosecution. So what he's effectively preparing his people for is that when he fights for this again, that people can be violent and they will not be charged. That's effectively what he's saying. He wants to give a free pass to anybody who is prepared to either overturn an election, to attack the Capitol, to cause criminal damage, let alone, be done up on a conspiracy charge. He's basically getting people off. He wants people to think that it's not going to be criminal to behave like this in future. This is a former president dangling the prospect of pardons for supporters who participated in the deadly January 6th storming of the U.S. Capitol if he returns to the White House. And I quote, "If I run and I win, we will treat those people from January 6th fairly," Trump said on Saturday night during a rally in Conroe. "And if it requires pardons, we will give them pardons because they are being treated so unfairly." The offer represents an attempt by Trump to further minimize the significant attack on the seat of government. Participants smashed through windows, assaulted police officers, and sent lawmakers and congressional staff fleeing for their lives while trying to halt the peaceful transition of power and the certification of rival Joe Biden's victory. More than 700 people have been arrested and charged with federal crimes in connection with the riot, marking the largest investigation of the Justice Department's history. And this includes seditious conspiracy charges against the founder and leader of the far-right Oath Keepers militia group. More than 100 police officers were injured, some critically, after Trump supporters stormed the Capitol following the Stop the Steal rally by Trump near the White House, in which he falsely claimed Biden had won the election through massive voter fraud. I mean, it's all come to light now. The whole system that they had planned to overturn the election, it's all come to light. It's all out there now. And there's a very good video. If you search the hashtag "a coup in plain sight," there's a very good video that puts it all together in 5 minutes, that shows you exactly what was planned, exactly how they tried to do it, the timing of everything, and the fact that it failed. 2 Republican senators on Sunday criticized Trump's suggestion of pardons as inappropriate. Maine Senator Susan Collins, one of 7 GOP senators who backed an unsuccessful bid to convict Trump of impeachment charges for his role in stoking the January 6 riot, said it would be very unlikely she would support him if he ran in 2024. I mean, that's just not true. She would totally support him. She's nuts. She really is. Susan Collins. She really is. She's just on another planet. She's so contradictory with her views. Just back and forth. I mean, it's like, pick one. Oh, she's the senator from Maine. And she was one of a handful that voted for his impeachment. And since then, obviously, she's changed her mind about him. You know, she would totally support him. They love him. They love him. They don't care about anything to do with voters or democracy or people. They just want the supreme leader. You know, this kind of godlike orange creature. Lindsey Graham rejected Trump's comments as sending a wrong message that it's okay to defile the Capitol. I mean, he changed as well. Do you remember the day after the insurrection? He was like, I'm done, I'm out, I'm not supporting this guy anymore. Now, of course, he's Trump's biggest fan. It says, as President Trump used his power to pardon or commute the sentences of numerous political allies, friends, and associates. Well, he misused his power, because a pardon is supposed to be in this case of injustice. A pardon is reserved, or to commute someone's sentence. That's like if someone's on death row and there's evidence that suggests they didn't do it. That's what you use a pardon for. You don't do it to get your friends out of jail, which is effectively what he did. I mean, Steve Bannon, he pardoned. Paul Manafort, lifelong criminal. Michael Flynn, who admitted to twice lying to the FBI, the former national security advisor, he admitted to twice lying to the FBI, got a pardon from Trump. And then, of course, Roger Stone. And the less we say about him, the better. Trump has criticized the Democrat-led House for its ongoing investigation of the riot. It says while his supporters overran the Capitol on January 6, Trump ignored desperate pleas from allies to forcefully disavow the attack and repeatedly praised those who participated in the protest. He said it was a lot of love there, he said recently in an interview on Fox News, speaking to those who attended the rally. Believe me, there was a lot of love and a lot of friendship and people that love our country. We just need thinking Americans to realize what's at stake here. It's not about electing one man forever. It's about saving the country from demagogues throughout future generations. But I personally don't think the American experiment is going to last that long. Isn't it interesting? It's so hard to know what percentage of people really take it seriously and understand that, what's at stake here. That in terms of polling, because I keep saying that I think Republicans think, or some Republicans think, that democracy is exclusive to Democrats. So there's no great desire to save democracy because they have a short-termist view. Well, but we want Trump. We don't care about democracy. We want Trump. That's what this guy has done. And you remember that America used to be heralded as one of the great Western democracies. It was the democracy that all democracies aspired to be. And we have those visuals of George Bush Sr. handing over to Bill Clinton, and Bill Clinton handing over to George Bush Jr., and George Bush Jr. handing over very nicely to Barack Obama. These smooth transitions of power from the left to the right in a respectable, moral, civil way. Well, because they respect each other, because they understand that they, as individuals, are not what the country voted for. The country voted for an ideology. And the ideology is led by that person. But, democracy is putting ourselves in the White House. We vote for ourselves. We are, society is government. Government is not some separate thing. It is society. That's what a modern functioning democracy is. And that's not what Trump is offering. And my concern is that, there was no transition of power between Trump and Biden because Trump refused to get involved with that. He basically didn't do any presidenting for the last 3 weeks. And yet, during that downtime, the time between losing the election in November and the inauguration in January, Trump removed people in senior positions Defense Secretary, DOJ, AG, like removed people so he could put Trump loyalists in. Because during that downtime between losing the election and the inauguration, he was planning a coup. Danar, thank you for joining us. Andrea, Sylvia, Sean, Stacy, Ethan, Eric, thank you for hanging out with us here on Backchannel. We're discussing the news, and it's a big story that Trump is offering pardons if he wins to people that were involved in January 6th. But what he's also not saying, but it's clear that he is that any future violence will be protected from prosecution, provided you're on his team. That's what he's effectively saying. It's so dangerous. It's like, wow, really? Really? Yeah, really. The Record Searchlight for this morning leads with gaps in coverage. It says retired Army Captain Michael Storm wanted to take advantage of a new federal plan that requires health insurers to pay for up to 8 home coronavirus tests each month. When the Alabama man tried to get the home test from his local pharmacy, he learned what tens of millions of Americans soon will discover. His federal health insurance provider doesn't cover over-the-counter tests. Storm gets his health insurance through TRICARE, a Department of Defense healthcare program that covers millions of active duty and retired military families. The home tests also won't be covered by Medicare, the nation's health insurance program that covers more than 61 million, mostly older Americans. Yeah, I knew this was going to be an issue. I've bought dozens of tests, and I'm probably not going to get my money back for any of them, but I have 2 tests that I bought last week that I'm going to try and get refunded. They're $24 each, and I'm going to go to the health insurance company because I had an email from them saying that they were covering it now, and I'm going to see what that process is like. See if it's possible. Breyer leaves abortion rights legacy. Also, it says Associate Justice Stephen Breyer wrote some of the Supreme Court's most important decisions on abortion over the course of his tenure, knocking down a series of barriers erected in conservative states that limited access to the procedure. But as Breyer prepares to step down this year, his legacy on abortion may go with him. The senior most liberal on the Supreme Court has announced he will retire nearly 3 decades after President Bill Clinton nominated him in 1994. Wow, 1994 seems like such a long time ago, doesn't it? It's crazy. And yet, it seems like yesterday. I actually watched some English television last night. I haven't watched any British TV in the 5 years that I've been living here. And so I went on YouTube and I searched the BBC on YouTube and I watched dozens of short videos that the BBC have been uploading in the last year or two. And all of the performers and actors and comedians and people that I was a fan of in England, they look so old. Oh my goodness. Just 5 years and a deadly pandemic, I guess. But everybody looks so old. And I was like, really? You aged that much? Couldn't believe it. Frank Skinner looked like the oldest man ever. Couldn't believe it. Literally looked like a grandparent. He used to be some like young dude. Okay, let's... A Reading man convicted of killing a 77-year-old shooting his dog. A Shasta County jury has found a Reading man guilty of murdering a 77-year-old man and killing his dog. Why would you kill the dog? I mean, why would he kill the man? But why would he kill the dog? He was also found guilty of burglary, grand theft of a firearm, animal cruelty, firearm-related enhancements, and other charges, the DA office has said. I'm really not enjoying the guns thing at the moment. Here's another one. Dozens of guns among items stolen from cargo cargo trains in LA. Dozens of handguns and shotguns were among items stolen by thieves who raided cargo containers aboard trains near downtown Los Angeles for months, authorities said. Police arrested 3 people last summer carrying new .22 caliber handguns, the Los Angeles Times reported on Saturday. Did you see the viral video yesterday or the day before yesterday of a road rage incident where a guy is driving and someone gets a bit too close to him, and so he reaches into his armrest compartment, and in there is like a lock, and inside the lock is a handgun, and the guy shot the other car 11 times through his own windscreen. He shot at this other car 11 times through his own windscreen. I was like, what? And guess what? Didn't get done for it. It was like a reminder that Backchannel has a growing list of shows here, including Hayley and Alison Live, waking you up in the morning with lots of laughs and their one-star cinema review, or Live Every Day with Liv Harrison, live from Texas, celebrating the little things in life with plenty of coffee. Or what about the charming and funny Hal Rudnick? His program, Your Pal Hal, directly follows this show, except he's not on today. You'll have our friend Rob instead entertaining you from 11 a.m. Pacific here on Backchannel. Let's see how you're doing here. Let's go to the Aspen Times for Colorado. I don't know why Colorado. To me, Colorado feels like Canada. I know it isn't, but what am I confusing Colorado with? Is it the fact that it's just so cold up there and snowy and stuff? It says, impacted by the pandemic, Aspen Recreation Center increases fees. Yes, it's raised its fees significantly and changed the residency requirement for its daily admission rate to make up revenue and reduce the city's subsidies to the facility. With current COVID conditions, the facility's cost recovery models are not what they used to be pre-pandemic, putting a strain on revenues and expenses, according to Corey van der Veen, the city's recreation director. And what else? Parents of cottage kids, COVID stress is next level. Mother of youngsters at care center who also work for Aspen School District hope for more mitigation measures. Is the headline. St. Lucie News Tribune. Next, Florida election law challenge set to begin. Opponents say restrictions target minorities. Republicans deny any intent to suppress votes. Well, of course they do. Yes, the legal battle over a highly controversial year-old election law that makes it harder for Floridians to vote by mail and do third-party voter drives, is set to begin on Monday in federal court in Tallahassee. Voting rights groups are set to argue that the law passed by the state's GOP majority legislature and signed by GOP Governor Ron DeSantis intentionally targets black and other minority voters and violates their First Amendment rights as well. State officials are expected to argue the law was not enacted in a vacuum and was intended to protect election integrity and prevent voter fraud. But there is no voter fraud, Ron DeSantis. This is the point. There is no voter fraud. None. The whole election, they found 475 votes that were miscast out of 160 million votes. It's clearly an anti-voter law, said Sabrina Khan, Deputy Director and Senior Staff Attorney for the Advancement Project National Office, a non-profit, non-partisan civil and voting rights organization. It has the power to silence voters in large blocks, particularly minorities, and hurt grassroots groups like ours. The case is expected to be watched with high interest around the country, she added. Immediately after DeSantis signed the bill into law during a private ceremony broadcast exclusively on Fox last May, the League of Women Voters of Florida filed a lawsuit challenging its constitutionality. They're not even doing it in secret anymore, you know. It's like it's in plain sight. The racism is in plain sight. You know, any Republican state that claims that they are putting in new measures to prevent voter fraud, it's just not true. There was no voter fraud in the first place. And this is what happens in totalitarian, authoritarian environments. They invent a problem and then they attempt to fix it. That's how it works. It's straight out of the strongman playbook. Invent a problem, then be seen to be the one to fix it. And that was like, Donald Trump's inauguration speech. The American dream is dead. I alone can fix it, he said. I mean, it's so obvious, though. Don't you think it's like really obvious, like what they're trying to do? Maybe not. Florida's iguanas chill out as state shivers in icy weather. It says a cold snap in Florida is different than in other places. We put on heavy coats when it's 50 degrees. No blizzard conditions here in the Sunshine State, but we do have our issues as well when the thermometer drops. The National Weather Service said on Sunday it's all going to warm up nicely after the weekend. The low temperatures near freezing are quite rare in Florida. Yeah, it's called a climate emergency. But at first glance, the citrus, strawberry and tomato winter crops suffered no major damage. Oh, that's okay. That's okay. Let's not mention the climate crisis. Let's just talk about the fact that the crops are going to be fine. Farmers spray water onto the crops to help protect them from the cold. That's good. More use of water. As for iguanas, well, that's another matter. They're an invasive species. Well accustomed to the trees of South Florida, when it gets cold, below 40 degrees, they go into a sort of suspended animation mode. Yeah. They try and stop themselves from dying. It's called a climate emergency. The iguanas are having to go into suspended animation. You think that's normal? It's not normal. They're coping. The iguanas are just coping. They can't put on a coat. They don't make coats for iguanas. You can put on a coat. What's Ron DeSantis is going to do now? He's going to announce a whole bunch of miniature coats. He's like, we're going to hang them on trees. The iguanas can put the coats on. He's inventing a solution in search of a problem. They usually wake up once they fall into the ground with the sun's warmth. It got cold in Florida this weekend. The National Weather Service reported West Palm Beach hit 37 degrees, the coldest morning of the past 12 years. Yeah, it's the climate change. Up the East Coast in Vero Beach, the record low was tied at 30 degrees. It's not been that cold since 1938. Still, it's not a whiteout. Oh, well, that's okay. That's okay. This whole article, not a mention of climate change. The St. Lucie News Tribune, not a mention of climate change. Like I said about NBC News, doing a whole 10-minute feature on the weather on the East Coast. Not a mention of climate change. Orlando Sentinel this morning. Orlando stays above freezing in big chill, it says. Heat radiating from pavements and lakes helped to prevent Orlando and some other cities from plunging below freezing early on Sunday morning. Orlando's coldest reading of 34 occurred just after 7 o'clock at around sunrise. Leesburg in Lake County, surrounded by large lakes, remained above freezing with the lowest reading of 33. Daytona International Airport got down to 31, 5 above the record of 26 for the day set in 1966. Elsewhere in central Florida on Sunday, it dropped to 20 degrees near Deltona in Volusia County and 30 south of Orlando in Okeechobee. Both of these areas typically see the lowest readings during cold snaps. By 8 a.m., Deltona and DeLand were still 27 degrees. It's climate change. You were warned. It's a bit like the pandemic, There's been warnings about the pandemic. Nobody prepared, nobody listened. There's been warnings about climate change. No one cares. Literally nobody cares. They're like, oh, we'll just adapt, we'll adjust. Wouldn't it be amazing if this planet, the whole planet, was carbon neutral? Think about that. Like if we didn't emit any toxins, any CO2 into the atmosphere, We didn't put any waste product into the rivers and the sea. We were completely neutral. Can you imagine what it would be like? There wouldn't be, the smog that we have. Certainly here in Los Angeles, we have this layer of pollution that sits over the city from the car exhausts. That wouldn't be there anymore. You'd be able to see stars in the sky. There wouldn't be respiratory illnesses, they wouldn't have to publish an air quality index every day. I'm just fantasizing about what it might be like if everybody was on board and was just yeah, we can't do this anymore. We have the technology. We've had the technology for decades. Fewer Americans trust tap water is the headline here. It says, Angela Stamps won't drink water from her faucet, showers less, and no longer takes baths since she once found relaxing. She doesn't cook with tap water and sometimes skips rinsing her produce. Even though the amount of lead in Flint, Michigan's tap water has been well below a key state threshold for several years, she hasn't been able to stop worrying since going through the trauma of the city's lead crisis. I just don't trust it, she said. It said, as the Biden administration looks to spend billions of dollars to address inequalities in water quality and access, officials must try to overcome persistent public distrust of tap water. Experts say it will be especially difficult to overcome in Black and Hispanic communities where suspicion can be entrenched because of past instances of being misled by public officials and high-profile lead crises in cities with large Black populations, including Flint and Newark. And you wonder why we shouldn't have a Black female Supreme Court justice. It's only invariably in issues like Flint, Michigan, and it's like people that are suffering are Black and Hispanic communities because of the way that governance is. The white, male, supremacist governments in these areas. And this is why we need, proportional representation. UCF's Coocast tries to predict government overthrows and US is rising on the list. This is fascinating. Get a load of this. Students at the University of Central Florida will soon be able to get involved in one of the most unusual academic projects anywhere. One decide to forecast which world governments are in danger of being overthrown. It says fragile governments in Africa routinely rise to the top of the list, but the United States has moved up over the last year with a higher risk of a coup than other large democracies. Coocast, an algorithmic artificial intelligence system originally created at the non-profit One Earth Future Foundation, is in the process of moving over to UCF over the next few months. Clayton Besort, one of the people working on the project at the school, said the program was originally an outgrowth of One Earth Future's mission to stabilize post-war countries. It says they wanted to see, Besort said, whether we could use advances in machine learning and statistical analysis to make pretty good predictions of things like state collapse, warfare, political violence, coups, and things like that. Jonathan Powell, a UCF professor and one of the developers of Coocast, said the computers can run millions of different models using various combinations of variables. I think various combinations of variables is basically saying variables twice, isn't it? It uses variables of variables, and it allows us to greatly go beyond what people would generally observe and get past the limitations of the human brain. I added the word brain there. It continues on page 5. I presume it's brain. I would love to see that. How do I look up Coocast? Let me see if it's possible to kind of look that up. and see if it's like a website or something. Coup cast. Because it's a little bit... Do you remember I recommended the US debt clock? Do you remember that? It was, I think it was worlddebtclock.org. Do you remember that? But didn't you look at the World Debt Clock? Do you remember I showed it to you? Yeah, the numbers. It was like you couldn't literally. Oh, US. I think it was usdebtclock.org. They have a World Debt Clock as well. Okay, I'm looking at this coup page, but I can't really see. Where the coup. What I would really like is to have like a kind of constantly updating live list. You know, that would kind of be interesting. Anyway, I'm going to bookmark it, and I'm going to save it for a future coup. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to save it for a future coup. So we've got some news to look at now. We're going to move on to the UK government is preparing to perform a major U-turn by scrapping mandatory vaccinations for hospital and social care workers. And we're going to be looking at the US and whether or not this is a thing. Oh yeah, we've got the US news update to do first. Why don't we do that? Because I've literally been talking for an hour and 21 minutes without taking a breath, nor even a sip of liquid. I have a rule. Do you know about this rule of mine? It's very stupid. And when I used to go and see Barry Manilow do a concert, I'm a big Barry Manilow fan, I would go and see him do a concert. And are you a fan too, Carla? This is wonderful. He's amazing. So you will never see the Manilow take a sip of a drink on stage. The guy is like 76. He will do 2 1-hour sets or 2 90-minute sets in some cases, or 90 minutes first half and an hour second half. He will never have a sip of a drink. Won't do it. Because it doesn't look good, does it? You know? These old school performers, I mean, he's referred to as the showman of our generation, never has a drink. And so I used to watch comedians who would go on stage and do like a 10-minute set, and they would take a drink on with them, and they'd drink all the way through their set. And I'd be like, how can they not drink for 10 minutes? You know, or why can't they not drink for 10 minutes? Why do they have to drink all the time? And it's an emotional crutch. It's not about lubricating the throat. And Manilow won't have a drink. I'm sure he has a little drink when he goes off stage, you know, in the break. But he also comes on in a new costume, so he probably spent most of his time in the break getting changed, getting his 2 little hip replaced legs into the skinny little legs into the new costume. Oh yeah, he's tall. I mean, I've met him. I've spent a bit of time with him and chatted to him, and he's tall, but he's just wonderful. I don't want to talk about it too much because I'll get too emotional. But so that's the reason why I try not to drink during this 2-hour show. It's out of respect for Barry Manilow, the showman of our generation. Anyway, here's the US news update. I'm a fan. Oh yeah, I'm a member of the Barry fan club. It's cool. I'm on BarryNet. Here's the US news update. It's Monday, January 31, from the Volley Net. Network. This is your daily US news update. I'm Anthony. More than 1,400 US flights were cancelled on Sunday after the nation's northeast states were hit a day earlier by a deadly winter
winter storm that prompted several states to declare emergencies. The total number of flight cancellations within, into, or out of the United States was about 1,450 as of Sunday afternoon. Another 1,774 US-related flights were delayed. LaGuardia Airport and John F. Kennedy International in New York City and Boston Logan International were among the hardest hit by delays and cancellations. The fierce winter storm on Saturday dropped more than 2 feet of snow on some areas, while packing high winds, prompting thousands of flight cancellations and leading governors in Rhode Island and other states to curtail access to the roads. New York's Long Island town of Islip was the hardest hit statewide. Governor Kathy Hochul said. Former President Donald Trump said on Sunday that if he was to run for president and win in 2024, he would pardon people charged with criminal offenses in connection with the deadly January 6 assault by his supporters on the U.S. Capitol. Trump has not said whether he will run for president again. After his defeat by Democrat Joe Biden in the 2020 election was speaking at a rally in Conroe, Texas. Your daily US news update is part of the Volley Network. To hear my live daily morning show, ask your Amazon Echo.
There it is, and there it was, the US news update. It was a little staccato today. I can only apologize. I think it probably is because I've got so many microphones today. I feel like I'm Commissioner Gordon giving a press conference after the Joker's done something particularly bad and Batman is nowhere to be seen. Come back, Batman. Did I tell you that I watched Batman Returns the other day? Did I tell you this, Carla? I can't remember. So one of my favorite films is The Dark Knight. You know? And I know it was maybe The Dark Knight Rises that I watched, which is the second one. So my favorite film is The Dark Knight, the Heath Ledger one. And then I have never really got into the one with Tom Hardy as Bane, which is the follow-up, because I could never hear Bane's voice. Could never hear it. Anyway, they've remixed it. And I can hear him as clear as day now. And I really enjoyed the film. So anything with Christopher Nolan attached to it is like, I'm a big fan. Big fan. Thank you for your messages. Lance has joined us. Hello, Lance. Diana is here for the first time. Welcome, Diana. Thank you for joining Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis. It's 10:30 on the West Coast, 1:30 Eastern. It's the 31st of January, last day of the month. Tomorrow is February, a brand new month, a brand new period, a Valentine's Day, all sorts of stuff to come next month, which we can look forward to. We're just about to look at the United Kingdom because the government there is preparing to perform a major U-turn by scrapping mandatory vaccinations for National Health Service and social care workers. Well, there's been warnings of a staffing crisis if the policy is brought in, with around 80,000 NHS staff unvaccinated ahead of an effective 3rd of February deadline to get their first jab. Well, the planned U-turn was first revealed by a newspaper last month. The Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, said to meet ministers today to discuss the reversal of the compulsory jab plans. I mean, I don't understand why there is 80,000 people in the National Health Service refusing to get vaccinated. I thought that they were all relatively, understanding of the technology and what it was all about. So all patient-facing NHS workers must be double vaccinated by April 1st or face losing their jobs under the current compulsory policy. With an 8-week minimum gap between first and second jabs, it means staff need to have their first dose by this Thursday to meet the deadline, and as many as 80,000 workers are yet to have a first dose. It comes after an estimated 40,000 social care workers lost their job after a November deadline for workers in that sector to be vaccinated. I mean, the Royal College of Nursing is saying that it would be an act of self-sabotage with the NHS already facing huge gaps among its workforce. The policy was announced at the start of November when Delta was the dominant COVID variant in the UK. And it says this week's reported U-turn comes with the more infectious Omicron strain, driving much higher case numbers, but with deaths and hospitalizations much lower than in previous waves. Yeah, but only for vaccinated people. This is what I don't understand. It's like Omicron is less severe, yes. But you still need to be vaccinated. I just don't get it. I mean, maybe I'm missing something. What am I missing, Carla? What am I missing? If you want to work in healthcare, you should really be vaccinated. Come on. You're required to get 1 million vaccines for other things. Why not this one? What's the big deal? Yeah, the vaccine arguably is going to. I don't know. I just cannot understand how now, after a year of having a vaccine, that people are still questioning it. The ones that were saying, I want to wait for a bit more research, I get that. The ones that are saying, I want to wait to see if there's any side effects, I get that. The ones who want to wait because they don't want to be first, I get that. It's been a year now. So here in the United States, 10 Republican state attorneys general, sued on Wednesday to stop the Biden administration requiring that millions of health workers here get vaccinated against coronavirus, saying it would worsen staff shortages. It says President Joe Biden, a Democrat, said last Thursday he will enforce the mandate starting on the 4th of January. The attorneys general of Missouri, Nebraska, Arkansas, Kansas, Iowa, Wyoming, Alaska, South Dakota, North Dakota, New Hampshire jointly filed a lawsuit in the district court for the Eastern District of Missouri in St. Louis. All Republican states. They said placing this additional mandate on healthcare facilities and employees will exacerbate the problem and will likely lead some facilities, particularly those in underserved rural areas, to close due to an inability to hire sufficient staff. The lawsuit said the federal mandate intruded on states' police power and is unlawful under the Administrative Procedures Act because there was no comment period before its release. I've heard that criticism and I get it, but there's a pandemic and there's a vaccine. The two work very well together. Pandemic, vaccine. Very good. Pandemic, no vaccine, bad. And, prior to the vaccine coming out, everybody was like, can't wait for the vaccine. I want this to be over. And then the vaccine comes out, and then there's people like, oh, I'm not taking the vaccine. And the only reason that people didn't want to take the vaccine is because conspiracy theorists like Robert Kennedy Jr. and Joe Rogan and people who have a platform made stuff up because they were looking to sell books or get podcast subscribers or create some kind of audience that they didn't previously have. The White House has issued a fact sheet. It says Biden administration announces details of 2 major vaccination policies. This was dated November 4th last year. It says, thanks to President Biden's focus on getting Americans vaccinated, 70% of adult Americans are now fully vaccinated, up from less than 1% when the president took office. This is significant progress made possible by a vaccinations program that made shots free and convenient for months. But more vaccinations are needed to save lives, protect the economy, and accelerate the path out of the pandemic. To that end, in July, President Biden began rolling out vaccination requirements for federal employees and contractors and calling on employers to do the same. Thousands of organizations across the country have answered the president's call, and vaccination requirements have already helped reduce the number of unvaccinated Americans by approximately 40% since July. My landlord still won't get vaccinated. His family, his daughter and his wife, they still won't get vaccinated. I've tried to talk to them. They're not interested. They don't want to engage. They feel like they've been tipped off. They feel like they know something that I don't know. And they are enjoying the fact that they're like, yeah, but we know the truth. We know the truth. And it's like, you know the untruth. They talk to me like, they say to me, you drank the Kool-Aid. And I'm like, no, I don't drink Kool-Aid. You drank the Kool-Aid. I mean, here's the other thing that I find so frustrating with my landlord. I literally spend my life engorged in the news, right? I on your behalf, I marinate myself in the news. I read more than they will ever read in terms of the news, right? I know the entire landscape. I make it my business to try and understand what people understand, what people don't understand. I look at the conspiracy theories. I look at all of it. And to me, it's very obvious what's happened. I look at left-wing news, right-wing news, and true news. But my point is that they don't invest in the news. They don't take the time to really, really study it. They just go on Facebook. And as we know, Facebook, tragically, is the proponent of most of the misinformation, because all you see on your feed based on the algorithm of your friends is the stuff that you are going to be interested in. And if you read an article about vaccine misinformation, that you think might be true, then it will feed you more of that stuff. I'm not on Facebook because I know it's toxic, but I do recognize that a lot of people get their news from Facebook. The only articles that I read that are about vaccines are medical journals that are peer-reviewed. I read Science. I read Nature. I read these medical scientific publications where consensus is an essential part of the analysis. I mean, I don't know. And this whole argument of natural immunity, it's just such a distraction. You know? It says the administration has previously implemented policies requiring millions of federal employees and federal contractors to be fully vaccinated to make it easy for businesses and workers to comply. The administration is announcing today the deadline for workers to receive their shots will be the same for the OSHA rule, the CMS rule, and the previously announced federal contractor vaccination requirement. Do you remember me saying the other day how interesting it is that police unions are the ones who are making the most noise about vaccine mandates? And this has exposed the fact that the people on the right, who are more anti-vaccine and more conspiracy theory, are also police officers. And what goes with the right is now the far right, because, of course, the right has shifted. And what comes with that is racism, and what comes with that is nationalism, and what comes with that is Nazism. And is it any wonder that Derek Chauvin executed George Floyd? It's almost like there's been an exposure now. COVID has exposed like the true interests of the people that are supposed to protect us. Where's the music gone, Carla? I was enjoying that. It kind of stopped. Yeah. I kind of feel like we are learning a lot about ourselves, courtesy of this pandemic. Like, I actually think that some good stuff has happened. You know, aside from the 800,000 deaths as a minimum, I think we've learned a lot more about ourselves, our ability to compromise, our desire to be more civic in our thinking. Vicky, hello. Thank you for joining us. Vicky with a V, welcome. Who's in California? Nice to know you're listening. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about was, what have we got time for? Well, the iguanas we've kind of talked about now, haven't we, really? We kind of did quite a bit on the old iguanas. But I mentioned a couple of times now that, you know, why is climate change missing from the analysis about all of this cold weather that's coming? Not heard anything about it. Let's look at the book banning, because this is very interesting. And I was very thrilled to see that. In fact, I tweeted about this earlier this morning. A Pulitzer Prize-winning novel about the Holocaust has topped Amazon's bestsellers list after a school board in Tennessee banned it. A Pulitzer Prize-winning novel about the Holocaust is, you know, it's not something you would expect to be the number one book on Amazon, right? So it's completely obvious that the reason that it's the number one book is because people are trying to address the wrongs of Tennessee's banning. Yeah, it's a graphic novel, that's right. Mouse, A Survivor's Tale, depicts how the author's parents survived Auschwitz during the Holocaust. Board members voted in favor of banning the novel because it contains swear words and a naked illustration. But now the complete Mouse, which includes all volumes, is a bestseller. Here's a little opinion piece about it, which is quite interesting. Oh, I think there's a paywall on here, so I can't really see it. That's slightly annoying. It's a shame, because that was going to be a nice opinion piece. Anyway, the point is that they say the mouse ban is even worse than you think for the American right. Teaching that Jews died in the Holocaust, Nazis are bad, and racism is unjust is so controversially woke, they must be banned, and Mouse won't be the last victim of this rising tide of censorship, is what the opinion piece says, fundamentally, because there is this desire now to just erase history. And the Holocaust, I've heard people on the right in schools say, well, you know, we have to give the opposing view. And when I heard them say that, I was like, hang on a second, what is the opposing view to the Holocaust? Any idea? Carla? Any idea? What is the opposing view to the Holocaust? That's actually what they said. We have to give all views the opposing view. What is the opposing view to the Holocaust? I can't work out what it is. Is it that it didn't happen? Well, that's Holocaust denial. That's not the opposing view. Is it that the Jews, 6 million that died, they actually were the persecutors and the Nazis were the ones that were executed? Maybe that's the opposing view. It's like, do you want to do the truth or not? I mean, like, pick one. How can there be an opposing view to the Holocaust? The only opposing view is that it didn't happen. And no one has ever said it didn't happen, because it happened. But now that we're in this world of alternative facts, thank you, Kellyanne Conway, people are actually thinking, well, hang on a second, I mean, that's just your opinion, isn't it? And it's like, no, it's not my opinion. I don't actually have an opinion on whether the Holocaust happened or not, because it happened. I can't have an opinion as to whether or not the Holocaust really happened. How can I have an opinion if there isn't? It's impossible to have an opinion. And so this is about like Ron DeSantis trying to create a solution for a problem that doesn't exist. It's exactly the same. So let's be very clear as to what banning Maus and other books is actually all about. Let's talk about what it's all about. Shall we? I mean, what's the truth behind it? Because there can't be two opinions on the Holocaust. So what is this about? If we're going to talk frankly, can we talk frankly? It's that the people that are announcing these bans, that want this type of book out of circulation, out of a school library or out of a curriculum or out of a extended reading materials or wherever, they want it banned, they want it burned effectively, is because these people are anti-Semitic. These people are the very Nazis that were the ones that encouraged, caused, and activated the Holocaust. The people that want these books banned are Nazis. That's what it is. They sympathize with the Nazi ethos. What else can it be? That they are anti-Semitic. They believe that Jews should be eradicated. They don't want people to learn about it. And if they don't want people to learn about the Holocaust, then they probably don't want people to learn that Jews even have any value in society anyway. What other reason is there? Now they'll claim, it's because there's nudity in the book or there's expletives in the book. But it's like, well, there's a gazillion books out there that have potential expletives and nudity. Why you pick this one? So if we're talking explicitly, my only conclusion that I can come to is that the people who are requesting these the banning of these types of books are themselves sympathizing with the events in the book, and they're on the wrong team. Because there is no opposing view to the Holocaust. 6 million people died. They were executed, they were shot, they were put in gas chambers, they were tricked as well. You remember, they were led into gas chambers thinking they were going for a shower. They were tricked. Mass graves. Mass graves. They would actually make other Jews dig these huge pits for which they eventually buried in these shallow graves their relatives. Now, maybe there are still people around who have no interest in history and, they just want to choose that it just didn't happen. They would rather take the opinion that, that didn't happen. It's a bit like closing your eyes to racism, closing your eyes to the atrocities in life. It's a bit like the military covering up, atrocities that they have committed. No, I mean, it wasn't that long ago. Exactly, it wasn't that long ago. It was like, 70 years ago. It wasn't that long ago. And the point is that it's already happening again, because if you look at Charlottesville, watch the video. The flags that the protesters are carrying are Nazi flags. They're wrapped in Nazi flags. And what were they shouting? What were they chanting? Jews will not replace us. And that was only 3.5 years ago. And the rise of extremism and terrorism in America is from the far right. It's not from Muslim extremists or brown people from the other side of the world. It's from white nationalists claiming to be patriotic, who clearly hate America because America is a country full of immigrants who want, as the Nazis did, to go back to a time where there was this white Aryan race that was basically their salvation. And with that, they've hijacked Christianity and they've hijacked all of these kind of sacred belief systems and wrapped it in the Nazi flag. And if you look at the kind of Republican attitude to immigrants, referring to them as illegals and trying to build a wall to stop people, I mean, how is that different to the Berlin Wall? How is that any different to the Berlin Wall? But on a lighter note, on this day, yes, it was Holocaust Memorial Day, that's right. In fact, I tweeted a link to an article in The Guardian on Holocaust Memorial Day with the hashtag Holocaust Memorial Day about the banning of Holocaust books in schools in America. That was the contradiction of my tweet. Hashtag Holocaust Memorial Day, article about the banning of Holocaust books. Just to remind ourselves that the hatred and that the prejudice and the anti-Semitism and all the aggression and all of the Nazism is still there. I mean, there wasn't Nazism in America. America was where the Jews came to escape Nazi Germany and to escape. It was the free West. It was Ellis Island. It was a passage to freedom where there was no tyranny. And so if you want to complain about why there are so many Jews in America, then complain about the fact that they were escaping. And so if it happened to you here, if there was somebody that decided they wanted to persecute people here, trust me, you would flee to somewhere safe. You'd go to Canada or Mexico or wherever you could get. Closest place. First place you could get to. But the Germans had taken all of Europe, all of Western Europe. They were bombing all of Western Europe. Normandy and London and so, and then Hawaii. The Japanese attacking Hawaii. I mean, I just feel like people have very short memories. Don't they? Anyway, let's just end on a lighter note because it's tragic, but it is something we need to talk about. It's very important because on this day, as I was saying at the beginning of the show, we are going to celebrate the Apollo 14. It was 1971. Apollo 14 departed the Earth planet for another planet. Well, it was a planet back then. The moon is not a planet anymore. It's just a moon. But it was astronauts Alan B. Shepard and Edgar D. Mitchell and Stuart A. Rooser successfully launched from Cape Canaveral in Florida on a manned mission to the moon. On the 5th of February, after suffering some initial problems in docking the lunar and command modules, Shepard and Mitchell descended to the lunar surface on the third moon landing. And upon stepping out on the lunar module, Shepard, who in 1961 aboard Freedom 7 was the first American in space, became the 5th astronaut to walk on the moon. Isn't that great? They stayed up there for the nearly 34 hours, conducting simple scientific experiments such as hitting golf balls into space, a bit weird, and collecting 96 pounds of lunar samples. There's so much junk up there. There's so much space junk up there. It's insane. The famous rookie crew and a famous golf ball. Interesting article on space.com about the Apollo mission. So there we go. It's a nice thing to end on. 1971. I wasn't quite born, but they were thinking about birthing me. Listen, thank you for joining me today. I'm Anthony Davis. I'll come back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Pacific, and that's noon Eastern. No, 9, 10, 11, 12, noon Eastern. Stay with Backchannel now for Rob. He is in for Hal, who is your pal. Your pal Rob is next here on Backchannel.